4th, 2024 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. There are paper copies of the agenda by the door if anyone wants one. And of course, the entire packet is available online. So for tonight's meeting, first we will have a consent agenda. We have a lengthy consent agenda followed by general public comment. For general public comment, we do welcome public comment for addressing issues that are not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our limited time and the need to have an orderly and efficient meeting, we apply certain rules regarding public comment. A recent Kansas federal court decision, has provided additional clarity regarding standards for public comment, and we have just updated our practices accordingly. We do our best to enforce these rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by each speaker. And that is that each speaker will be limited a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we always accept public comment of any length in writing. Additional speakers may not donate unused time to other speakers. All comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission. We also, to maintain the decorum of our meeting, prohibit public comments that are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent, fighting words, slander, or speech that invades the privacy of individuals, unreasonably loud, disruptive, repetitive, or that interrupt or substantially interfere with the board's ability to conduct county business. We do reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker who violates these public comment rules. During that time, we'd give you your full name and address for our meeting minutes and address comments to the Commission. Please know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comment on the spot, but if you leave contact information with county staff, we will try and get specific questions answered. After that, we will move to our regular agenda, and for each action item, we'll hear from staff or an applicant, followed by questions from the Commission, and then open that item also up for public comment relative to that item. Once public comment for that is closed, we bring it back to the Commission for further discussion and a vote. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. We do have with us Commissioner Kelly online. Thank you for joining us. And I would ask commissioners, are there any consent agenda items that you would like to pull for further conversation? No. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to pull a consent agenda item for further discussion?
1.4 and 1.6.
Okay, we have 1.4 and 1.6. Sarah, is there anyone online? No. Okay. With that, commissioners, I would entertain a motion for the balance of those items.
This Commissioner Reed, move to approve items 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, 1.10, and 1.11.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed. So we have item 1.4, emergency management. And do we have anyone here who wants to address that? Or Sarah, do you want to any introductory comments?
I would just respond to any questions the Commission has.
Okay. I had all of my questions answered. Commissioners, anything you would like to talk about before public comment on this?
No.
Okay. Is there anyone who'd like to give public comment on item 1.4 from the consent agenda?
I pulled this to discuss one name only. In the social services realm, actually two names, but in the social services area, you have Kim Murphy, who is listed from the LDS Church. However, Kim has an important role within the police department. And I would hope that maybe we could get somebody that has less of a vested interest in the police department on that social services panel. And the reason is because what we've seen in the city, as well as county areas, is the move to criminalize instead of treating properly and the wraparound services that were referred to. The other name on there is Matthew Falk from Burton Ash. In my opinion, he's a bit out of touch with the reality on the street and a little stuck in the books. I mean, he's very smart about the grant programs and how all that stuff works, but he's not very smart about trying to be helpful on the streets and interacting on the streets. He's very closed off and not very open to those kind of things. I think we need more people that are able to address the actual issues on the streets in a more productive way than these two could. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to give public comment on item 1.4? Anyone online? Okay, with that closing public comment, bringing it back to the commission for any further discussion or a motion.
This is Commissioner Reed. I don't have any further discussion. I appreciate the public comment and duly noted. I move to approve item 1.4 on the consent agenda.
Commissioner Kelly, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And item 1.6, this is a sheriff's item request. Do we want to have any comments? Do you want to address anything first or just have public comment? Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions before we do public comment on this?
None from me.
With that, we have public comment for this one. You can come on up.
This item is a request to waive the formal bidding process, and this is a highly unique request because normally when you're asking to waive a formal bidding process, it's for a more legitimate reason, such as there's only 2 distributors in the world and one is just 100 miles away, or that this is such a specialized product that we can only get it here, or that it's such an emergent issue it has to happen now and we don't have time to do the bidding process. Reading into this, what I learned was that the sheriff is stating that he has already conducted a bidding process and he has already determined for the commissioners which is the best deal, and that's the one he's presenting to you. That's not an appropriate way to waive a normal bidding process. That's basically commandeering the bidding process and taking it out of your hands. Those bids should have come to the commission and they should have been discussed in a normal bidding process rather than the sheriff making a unilateral decision and then recommending that the commission approve it. I hope the commission knows enough about the bidding process to realize that this is not an appropriate way to request to waive that bidding process. If you read into these documents, and I'd like to see a little bit more discussion on this, it actually says in there, the sheriff describes his bidding process being undertaken and that he has made this determination. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to give public comment on item 1.6? Anyone online? Okay. At closing public comment, bring it back to the commission. Any thoughts, questions, or motions?
Is anyone there from the sheriff's office to address this?
Yes.
Good evening, Commissioners. Gary Bunting with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. So to respond to Mr. Aravi, we did evaluate a number of different devices that each had different capabilities. And what we found is this particular device that we are requesting permission to purchase had the capabilities that we needed for efficiency purposes. This device is the only device at this time that really does what it does. So what we ran into is we had a situation where multiple vendors sold the same device, and we solicited the lowest possible bid that we could for that particular device through the vendors that we were able to have contact with. And it was through a GSA contract, which other vendors provided a price for us that was approximately $30,000 to $40,000 higher, but utilizing this vendor with this GSA contract, we saved quite a lot of money going through that. So our determination was based on functionality and efficiency of what we needed to meet our needs.
Commissioner, did you have questions for Major Bunting?
Yeah, I mean, I see in the enclosure, it says that it takes significant time to do the bidding process. What about the bidding process is restrictive to, take so much time that we couldn't do what we normally do?
Gary, I can maybe answer a little bit and then you can go in there. A traditional RFP process for us takes anywhere between 90 and 120 days so that you allow all the potential respondents plenty of time to prepare proposals, and you have to prepare very specific specifications as opposed to sort of, and make them generic enough that they could be responded to for a wide variety of vendors, as opposed to evaluating what is commonly available on a website or from a, a proposal. So it's, those are some differences that lead to longer times. We can try to do it faster, but then you worry that you don't have time for people to respond appropriately. Gary, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
Yeah, Commissioner, exactly as the county administrator said, I think the major difference being the formal bidding process versus kind of ours was more of an informal process that we completed. It's time lengthy and based on incidents that we've had, kind of lended to our urgency of being able to make this purchase.
Those are all my questions. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I don't have any more questions.
I would say that the GSA contract, if the GSA contract is put together in a very specific way that doesn't meet the specifications of a competitive bid contract under our purchasing policies. That being said, normal contracts, this wouldn't have even, our purchasing policies allow us that if we can piggyback on an existing contract, we would just do that regardless of the dollar amount. So, and also part of the reason why it is here is because of the specifics of the GSA contract. So if this had been a state of Kansas contract, we would have just moved forward with the purchase. So to me, that's more of why this feels like a technical issue, because they are using a contract. It's just not, it doesn't meet certain definitions of how it's competitively bid, but it is a reduced price.
Is there any need to work on our bid process in order to allow for GSA contracts?
I think that's something I can have the purchasing manager take a look at.
Okay, be great. I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you. Commissioners, anything further, or I would entertain a motion?
I would just ask that in the future, if we have, if it tells us that they've collected bids, and listening to the sheriff's department say they collected bids and this was the lowest one, that could be included in the memo. But we don't have that information in the memo. So, and I appreciate what Commissioner Willie said about looking at our policy. If we need to change our policy for this technical issue, let's take a look at it.
I appreciate those comments.
I too appreciate those comments, and I'll move forward with a motion to approve item 1.6 on today's consent agenda.
Commissioner Kelly, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for the discussion. That moves us to general public comment. Do we have anyone here in the room who would like to give general public comment this evening?
I was going to speak about other things, but I really have to address this bidding process again because it's no longer on the agenda now. It's over. The fact that they took the bids, that was the time. There was the time that was lost. That now is an urgent matter. They did the bidding process instead of you guys, and you guys just let them have it. That's extremely disappointing because you're going to vary a policy to slide something through like this that really is improper. And Mr. Kelly, it does actually say it in the agenda. If you open up the full one and go to this area, it does talk about the sheriff collecting the bids and deciding on his own which one was the lowest one. And that is the job of the county in this case. And to just waive it because they've already done it, and the gobbledygook about a different contract and all that really is regardless to this, because if that really mattered, we wouldn't have to do the waiver. It would already be purchased under an existing contract. My last little bit of time, I'm going to speak to gun violence. I've spoke to a few of your deputies about the fact that we have gun crimes that are not being investigated. People pulling guns on people, shots fired, you name it. non-death gun crimes, non-injury gun crimes that are not being investigated. I've seen a situation or two where cops have appeared to be scared and leave the scene without fully investigating it. And as we know, we've ended up with a number of murders in this town as a result of gun violence. So my public comment tonight is addressed toward the law enforcement, and you guys need to direct them to start taking a better hold on gun violence in this community. Because if they don't start addressing the shots fired calls, the brandishing calls, the I pulled a gun on somebody calls, you're going to end up with another murder in town. And unfortunately, it's been teenagers. The most recent one, 14 years old. That's unacceptable. Not when we can prevent it. And I'd challenge that it's not being prevented because the police aren't properly investigating crimes when they are fearful of the people.
Do we have anyone else who'd like to give general public comment? Do we have anyone online?
You, going to move Sherilyn Wells into the panel. Sherilyn, you're in the panel. You can provide your public comment. Sherilyn?
Maybe her mic is not working.
Yeah, I can't tell. Sherilyn? Okay. Yeah, she's off mute, so I assume her mic's not working. I'll move her back out.
Is there an opportunity if she gets her technical issue fixed to circle back? We don't have any other public comment, I don't think, to keep it open.
Yeah, you'd have to open up public comment again.
I would.
Sherilyn, can you provide public comment?
I might just suggest that if Sherilyn's able to hear us potentially that and is able to use the chat function, that she could send a note for staff to see if she's still interested or available in making public comment, and staff can let us know if that comes during the meeting later and we can reconsider as a commission.
Okay.
Also very happy to get email or phone call follow up if that is a help also. So, all right, do we have any other public comment? That was all. Okay, we're closing general public comment, bringing it back to our regular agenda items. And the first one is we have an update on American Rescue Plan open space allocation. So we have a variety of staff people here for that. Who would like to kick us off?
Thanks, commissioners. I'm going to move Kim into the panel, and she's going to run the presentation. Kim, you might introduce your team working on this presentation with you.
Good afternoon. I'm Kim Kreiner Ritchie, County Sustainability Manager, and part of what we've begun to call the Open Space Team. Tanya Voigt from Zoning and Codes and Chad Voigt from Public Works will be speaking with me tonight. Okay, so we are here to update you on the next phase of applying the allocated American Rescue Plan funds toward goals of the Open Space Plan. As a refresher, in 2022, 2.78 million in American Rescue Plan funds were allocated by the Board of County Commissioners toward implementing open space conservation. At that time, many of those priorities were yet to be determined by the forthcoming open space plan. However, in the meantime, a portion of these funds have gone toward heritage conservation grants that were specifically geared toward open space conservation and access, completion of the open space plan, and matching funds to acquire land that was approved for buyout by FEMA due to flooding. Open Space Plan, adopted by you on April 3rd, and which you approved a resolution for today, recommended 3 conservation focus areas that the county could act on. When we brought you the plan in April, we also indicated that we would strategize to apply these ARPA funds across all 3 areas, thus serving both public areas, landowners, ecology and climate resilience, culture and heritage, in addition to being able to spread the funds out geographically. Today, we have an update on the opportunity to use ARPA funds toward one of these focus areas, enhancements to access and enjoyment at current public open space areas. This was a resounding theme in our community conversations about open space when we were in plan development. We often heard, what places are available now? How do people find out about them? Who takes care of them, and how do they do it? So this was a strong prompt to examine what we are currently stewarding and to make the most of it. So I'm going to turn it over to Tanya to talk about the space of focus tonight, which is Lone Star Lake Park.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Tanya Voigt, the Zoning and Codes Director. So tonight we're here to talk about potential improvements to be made at Lone Star Lake. And I just want to give just a little bit of background for those that are not familiar with Lone Star Lake about really what it offers and the benefits to the public. Lone Star Lake is one of our existing county open space areas, and it's open year-round. It's located in southwest Douglas County on 422 acres. The 185-acre lake was created by damming Washington Creek between 1934 and 1940. The Civilian Conservation Corps built today's campground and used the campground as their base camp during the construction of the dam. This is a photo of the face of the dam in 2019 after Public Works completed a project to improve the dam. This is one example of the many projects that have been done to maintain this park. This is a recent photo of the dam with native plantings, so you can just see the after construction. And the Lone Star Community Building was built in 1974 and was permitted as a concession stand. From 1974 into the 1990s, it was available to the public to rent non-motorized boats and provided seasonal food service. It was remodeled in 2013 and is now available to the public to rent as an event center. The swim beach was built to repair a slope failure in 1998. The ADA fishing dock was constructed on the north shore of the east arm of the lake with Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, Communities, Fisheries, Assistance Grant Funds in 2019. The historic campground is located on the east side of the lake and includes both primitive and developed camp spots. The campground has 62 spaces. 43 are non-electrical and 19 are electrical. The electrical spots are almost always at full capacity. Public Works is also considering future improvements to the campground area, which would include playground, restroom, and shower upgrades. These upgrades are not a part of today's proposed improvements, but will likely need to be discussed in the future. This leads to a discussion about what improvements are being proposed with this request, which I'll turn over to Chad to go into the details.
Thank you. So yeah, we've got some ideas for Lone Star Park that whether they're part of this funding or not, they're ideas that we would want to keep on the table. The first would be, let's see if it's listed first. Okay, so East Shore improvements, the Point shelter replacement, we've got the largest of our shelters is located on what you could call the East Point, and it's in pretty rough shape. It gets a lot of use, and the crew has identified that it either needs to get some serious maintenance work or get replaced, and it seems to make the most sense to replace it. The work would include a new structure and probably reconfiguring the landscape with the location of the driveway and, maybe better visibility at the lake shore. So just some rough ideas for that site. Still on the East Shore, the swim beach dock is, it's good, but it's a little unstable. And with the number of people using it, it would be good if we could replace that with a larger, more stable facility. It's a very busy beach, and that would be a big benefit for folks. And then the ADA accessible kayak launch is a project that's been on our list as long as I've been here. This is a roll-off dock kind of assembly where someone in a kayak can locate in the kayak and then roll themselves into the lake and then pull themselves back out. And it's something that Doug Stevens in our department has been looking for grant funds for many years for. That would be located near that ADA fishing dock on that side where there's already a kayak launch that's just basically like a concrete slab. Going to the West Shore, there's another shelter that's slightly smaller. We've got a picture there. That shelter also is fairly old and needs improvement, and the crew would like to elevate that site a little bit too, so that there's not a drop from the parking area, and it would make it more accessible to folks and safer for kids and that kind of thing. So rebuilding that shelter is listed. Still on the West Shore, a new fishing dock installation. There's a boat launch on that side of the lake, but there's not an area to fish other than the shoreline. So that's something that they've got listed. And then a big one is the new vault restroom facility for the West Shore. We've got folks using the West Shore for the boat launch, for picnic areas, for that shelter area, and fishing on the shoreline, and there's no restroom facility. And so I initially heard this issue from cabin owners who are also on the west side, and they said they frequently see people using trees. And I've observed that too. So it's a real issue, and it's a long drive around the lake to get to the community building restroom. So that would be a fairly significant investment for the park, but it's probably the highest of all of these in terms of priority. And then to get that done, that's a fairly sloped area. So we've included West Shore site work, which is grading and road improvements associated with those areas. And then finally in the campground, we continually are kind of whittling away at improving things in small steps. And it'd be nice to take a big step and replace all of the picnic tables and then install all of the campground fire rings. We've got a few of those replaced, but getting all of them done would be a big step. So that's the group of projects that we've kind of pulled together and identified as a good candidate for this funding if it's available. I'll also note that I listed the 3 structures, the 2 shelters and the restroom, in the capital improvement plan that you recently received, the draft plan for next year.
Sorry to flip around so much. Okay, so just to wrap up our presentation tonight, I wanted to come back to the balance on the allocated ARPA funds. So with the previous expenses on the Heritage Grants, FEMA buyout, and open space plan, which I want to point out, there was a previous slide that had an error on it. That was it read 190,000. That was incorrect. This is the correct number, 290,000 that's been allocated and expensed. An estimate of about 600,000 with the improvements that Chad outlined for you tonight leaves a balance of approximately 1.89 million that we would be looking to continue to allocate across the 3 areas, and in particular toward the 2 that we didn't talk about as much tonight, the programmatic support for private land conservation and conservation of the Wakarusa River corridor. Staff are in very promising conversations with partners from the Kansas Land Trust, to hydrology experts, to bring some projects into form that we can bring details to you. Hopefully by the beginning of fall. We'd really like to be back in front of you with an approximate budget and some project details. So with that, we'll have your questions, please.
Thank you. I, for one, am very excited to see the investment in Lone Star Lake. I think it's a gem. It's a great recreation piece for our county, but it does have some needs. I did also flag, just you mentioned that some of those were also in the CIP. And is that the intention that if we're not funding them through this ARPA, that they're proposed to be funded through a regular CIP process, or what's the hope for that?
The current CIP document shows that as partner funds, and that refers to this ARPA grant. If we don't do this, then we would leave those listed, maybe seek some grants, and then try to backfill that with another request to you for capital improvement funding.
Okay, appreciate that. Commissioners, what questions do you have?
This is Commissioner Reed. I'm curious about the toilet. Because it is a need. So it's been a long time since I've been inside that community building. Is it a fully plumbed bathroom in the community building?
Yes.
Are there vault toilets in the campground?
The campground also has a restroom that is not a vault situation.
Okay.
There's a collection system.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit more about the different, so that sounds like maybe with a vault toilet, a collection system in the campgrounds, and then a fully plumbed indoor bathroom right at the community building. That's 3 different types of toilets. Will you help me understand a little bit about why the vault toilet feels like the right way or right investment for that site, and what the differences are? And is there any consideration about the campground toilets and any possible updates or better possibilities there?
Sure.
Also, can I add one more question?
Oh, go for it.
I have a feeling, and I didn't go do my pre-research on this, that our regulations may not quite allow for it, but I'm curious if compost toilets were a part of the conversation at all, and if so, why that might not be a possibility, just out of personal curiosity.
Sure. So on the west side, we wouldn't want to go to the extreme expense of having plumbed sinks and water lines that feed the site, and wastewater held in a separate tank. That starts to turn it into double the cost probably. So an efficient package would be a vault where it's similar to what you see in state parks, national parks, where it doesn't involve plumbing of water supply. And so, in the pandemic, you usually saw the hand sanitizer mounted outside, now that we're all used to those. So that's a limited, structure in terms of function, and it fits a site where you don't want to run utilities and add that cost. Certainly we could go further, but I think it does get very expensive quickly. On the east side, there is a full bathroom, a men's and women's restroom in the community building. It's open from the east door, separate from the community building space that can be rented. And that provides a huge amount of service to people. And it's actually the custodial staff from this building has to go out there twice a week to clean that. And so there's another angle that the more of these facilities that we build that are fully functional, the more it increases our need to maintain those, keep them clean and stocked and that kind of thing. So kind of limiting how much we get into this, but providing the service is kind of the sweet spot we're looking for. As far as the campground facilities, that building is fairly old, but we aren't trying to push things too far here. If you feel like there's an appetite for more investment of that kind, then we could certainly look at costs to improve that facility also. It will need to happen eventually.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think I was mostly interested. It's also been a while since I've been to the campground, but I didn't remember it being a vault toilet, so I was curious about the choice of that, and it makes sense to me that we wouldn't fully plumb and go through the extent of building that kind of infrastructure on the other shore. I just wondered how it compared to the collection system as you describe it, and whether or not there might be any cost benefit to looking at an investment in the campground too, if it has, I mean, I'm just not familiar if it's creating larger issues for public works staff in terms of managing it or fixing anything, since it is an older system. And I was at least aware of that, even if I don't know the ins and outs of how it's managed, right, and what the tricky parts of that are or aren't. But was just curious to know if that was part of the consideration. It sounds like a little bit, but mostly the investment or the focus is on creating a site in a new spot rather than updating across the board all the restroom facilities.
I think as we get into the details, if this is green lighted, we would get more information about those facilities and whether that does tie in terms of similar work that we could benefit from. The only thing I understand is that we don't have wastewater collection, so everything has to be taken away in a truck. So we have tanks that get pumped, just like all the cabins. And so it's similar in terms of function. It's just that a vault toilet package is assumed to be an efficient, process from a cost standpoint.
Got it. Thank you.
So in terms of the campground facilities there, the toilet and shower facilities, you mentioned that those will need to be replaced at some point. Is that something that during this process we need to lay eyes on, and kind of whether it falls under this request or on our CIP, that we start scheduling for that?
We could consider that. The idea here was we had a certain kind of range dollar amount that we were aiming for, and we looked at all of the improvements and basically just went through those in priority until we hit that max. Easy to keep going, obviously. The thing about all of the facilities out there is that we have a crew that maintains them very well and can keep things going. So, to just say that, oh gosh, it's in trouble, we need to replace it, I could see us still getting by if we don't want to put that money out there.
No, I'm very happy with the priorities you landed on, and I'm curious to see some more specific dollar amounts put to them. My only thought was, like, are we looking at a 10-year time frame or a 20-year time frame when that becomes a more critical upgrade need, the campground?
Yeah, we would have to look harder at what the facilities are in that campground restroom in terms of maintenance calls. Maybe talk to the custodian about how hard it is to clean, gather more information, basically. So just not an area we've spent time on.
When you say the custodian, is it the campground host that also has that responsibility, or is it your staff from here that's doing that cleaning and maintenance?
He takes some of that on. It's not asked of him, but certainly I think he's got several cases of toilet paper in his truck, so making ends meet, so. But yeah, Tanya also pointed out, this is a seasonal campground, so, keeping it running in the summer is fairly easy. If this was year round, I think we'd be more panicked about, long-term planning for improvements.
What are the hours of bathroom access at the two existing facilities now?
Dale, do you know? The sheriff helps us a lot with keeping things unlocked. So.
It's on the website.
Is it?
Yeah, let's see if I can find it.
Well, while Sarah's looking at that, I have one other question. I don't want to forget Commissioner Kelly also. There's some really fun history in and around the creation of Lone Star Lake and why the campground has these kind of strange chimneys here, because they were CCC dormitories buildings before, and the water tower that's there. There's some really neat pieces. Is there any conversation around, with these funds, also capturing some of that historical story and making that available for the public at the lake?
So that is obviously not part of what we've prepared tonight, but I would say this is just one chunk of what we wanted to bring you in terms of what we proposed to do with this gift of this allocation. Culture and heritage is certainly an open space priority, so I think we'll continue to look for those opportunities.
Okay. Commissioner Kelly, did you have anything you wanted to ask or add?
No, I appreciate the questions from my fellow commissioners. Those were mine as well, especially around the CIP budget and whether these were in that CIP budget. So thank you for those.
Not so much around toilets? So I do have a real interest in like the historical part of it, and I don't know if the team is interested in, maybe having some additional conversations around that to see if that is a piece that fits in with, kind of these physical structures of also capturing the stories there, especially if there's a redo of a lot of the camp sites, because I think there's some history that's, within some of those sites that are there that I wouldn't want to see lost unless we had a good reason and we're still capturing the story.
Hi there, I'm Caitlin Amerlin, the Heritage Conservation Coordinator and part of the open space team. But yeah, this is part of the conversations we've been having. The CCC camp is listed on the National Historic Register, so it is a historic place, so we'll be taking care and consideration there as needed. And we've got some great ideas of how to capture that history and share it, and I feel like even just now I was sitting there brainstorming a bunch of different ideas that we can come up with, so be happy to work with you too and our local historical societies, either the Wakarusa River Valley Heritage Museum or Watkins, collecting that history in one spot. I think there's some really neat opportunities, especially if there's further investment there in the site.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, other questions before we do public comment? No? Okay, this is a public agenda item. Is there anyone who'd like to give public comment on this? And do we have anyone online? Okay. That will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. The action that you're looking for out of this is, it says informational only, but are you looking for kind of an indication from the commission if this is the right direction and to bring back a budget? What's the requirement?
Well, yes, informational. We had pledged to come back to you with updates as our ARP allocation was developing. So yes, wanted to share this with you, see what questions, possible concerns you might have, and make sure we're headed in the right direction.
Then I would say the construction staff will proceed on the projects and just in accordance with our finance policies. But if some of the work is done ourselves, sometimes that'll negate some of the cost.
So this, rough dollar amount is what we would be working off of, and not like a larger, more detailed budget. It would be
the budget would be the 600,000, which we think will accomplish all those projects.
Commissioners, any other thoughts you'd like to share?
I'll just echo some comments I heard from fellow commissioners before, and that I think that these are some really critical investments in our largest and seemingly most visited, most utilized public space that the county manages. And so I've certainly, even though it's not in my district, know plenty of people who frequent it and have shared commentary with me about facilities or lack thereof, such as bathrooms on the other side of the lake. So I zeroed in on that part and appreciate that this is a really good opportunity to be efficient in making upgrades that are really critical to all the main parts of the infrastructure, and that sets a good baseline for future improvements and should really be long lasting, and hopefully gives public works space in the CIP over future years to identify some of those other things that have maybe not been prioritized yet, because we've been able to accomplish a lot all at once with some targeted investments and economies of scale that come with that.
I love to see this investment. It's a gem. Lone Star Lake is. I've used all of the facilities that we've talked about there, and have valued those, but also kind of recognize that there are possible additions that would be a very real asset there. The other piece I wouldn't mind having in the conversation for either now or later might be, a trail as opposed to people walking along the road to get from location to location. I think that if there's room within the kind of that wooded area there, I think that would be highly used also. I have not looked at any kind of layout or anything, but that's a conversation I would also be really excited to hear. With that, I think this is informational only, and have you gotten out of us what you've needed in terms of direction or conversations?
Yes, these have been great questions, given us more to think about.
And Commissioner Kelly, seeing a nod there too.
Yeah, I would just say I'm supportive of the improvements that we've shared today. I know we have a time limit on these ARPA funds that we need to spend them, and if that puts some relief on our CIP funds, that sounds good to me.
All right, thank you. We will move on to our next item, which is also with administration, and this is an update from the Food Policy Council, and we do have members of the Food Policy Council here as well as staff. So I don't know if Connie is going to start with us, or Sarah, if you have some
Connie is
thoughts.
going to give the presentation. Connie, I need to move you into the panel.
And thank you all for being here.
Yeah, generally I just have staff back behind here, so I can have staff.
I'm presenting with them.
Well, then maybe you want to stand up there. That might work better then. There's already a microphone. You don't. Well, sure.
And feel free to pull up chairs if you want them there, or stand, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, generally people stand at the podium. Sorry, I'm a stickler for routine. So. So you have to accept me letting you into the panel. In order for you to do the presentation. Then you can share your screen.
Okay. Is that good? I think. Just want to make sure that they have their mic on as well. It's just you press the button, right? To speak? Okie dokie. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and commissioners. My name is Connie Fiorella Fitzpatrick. I am the Food Systems Specialist with Douglas County Sustainability Office. I serve as the staff liaison for Douglas County Food Policy Council. And today, my colleague Star Her Many Horses and Council Co-Chair Cody Haynes and I will be providing an update on the Douglas County Food Policy Council. And we may refer to it as DCFPC or FPC through the presentation. And I will let Star and Cody introduce themselves.
Okay, just hold it. Hamitaki Chante Washte Nape Chu Zapi, Star Her Many Horses Zimachapi, Oglala Lakota, Cheyenne, Taos Pueblo, Meskwaki, Nal Ojibwe, Hemataha, Pilamiapi. Good afternoon, and I greet you all with a good heart and a handshake. My name is Star Her Many Horses. I come from the Oglala Lakota, Cheyenne, Taos Pueblo, Meskwaki, and Ojibwe nations, and I am the the food systems intern with the Douglas County Sustainability Office.
And my name is Cody Haynes. I am one of the co-chairs of the Douglas County Food Policy Council. I am also the chair of Forward, which is the Food Recovery, Waste Reduction, and Diversion Working Group. I am also a farmer in Douglas County, not very far from Lone Star Lake. In case you're unfamiliar, the Douglas County Food Policy Council, part of our job is to identify the benefits, challenges, and opportunities for the successful, sustainable food system in Douglas County, Kansas. We will cover what food systems are. The Douglas County Food Policy Council is a joint Douglas County and City of Lawrence board. Our purpose is to advise elected officials on food system-related policy issues and to provide a community forum for local food system development. Our work is guided by our document, the Douglas County Food System Plan. We are a 16-seat board. Right now, we're moving towards a horizontal leadership. I spent some time in a 2-year community of learning practice hosted by the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future and the Mississippi Food. It started as the Mississippi Food Coalition and became the Mississippi Center for Mississippi Food Systems. It was partially funded by a Kellogg grant, and so part of one of the things we're doing by moving to chair and vice chair into a rotational co-chair model is to make sure that it is easier for people on the Food Policy Council, 1, to get presence in leadership, 2, to have more presence in setting the agenda and participating in leadership. In case you're unfamiliar and have never seen our stickers or this diagram, this is helping represent sort of the integrated nature of our food system. Our work is guided, again, by the Douglas County Food System Plan. What is a food system? Our local food system includes how we produce, prepare, buy, eat, and dispose of food in our county. The journey our food takes from field to plate is influenced by the ecosystems, education, culture, funding, research, and public policy. Working together can lead to many benefits for our community. This work that we're working on includes strengthening connections between area producers and consumers to keep food dollars and food resources local.
So one aspect of working in food systems is collaborative work across our uniquely large network of food and farm councils in the state of Kansas. Kansas actually has the largest number of food and farm councils per capita in the United States. Our food council is a member of the Kansas Food Action Network, also known as KFAN. KFAN convenes food and farm councils across the state via Zoom calls every month, where members can share updates, learn, and also this creates a space, a platform for cross-council collaborations. So the map on the top right shows the currently active and emerging food and farm councils in Kansas. The photo on the top left is a picture of myself, Cody Haynes, and Pantaleon Flores, with Representative Christina Haswick during the KFAN Advocacy Day in March of 2024 at the Topeka Capitol Building. The timeline on the bottom left shows actions the Douglas County Food Policy Council takes to draft the legislative priority recommendations for KFAN and also for Douglas County. Through the year, the Food Policy Council keeps a running list of topics to bring up for discussion during the legislative priority season. In August, the DCFPC attends the KFAN annual convening to discuss and vote on the KFAN legislative priorities with food and farm councils all across the state of Kansas. During the months of September and October, the DCFPC works on drafting and voting on the legislative priority recommendations for Douglas County, and these recommendations are shared with Douglas County administration staff the first week of November to be considered for the Douglas County legislative priorities. Something interesting that took place this year is that KFAN has developed a Kansas Food Policy Council. The image of the bottom left shows staff and membership of this newly developed statewide Food Policy Council.
So an effort currently taking place by the Food Policy Council to achieve community outreach is hosting our public meetings in various locations throughout Douglas County. These meetings take place the third Monday of every month from 6:30 to 8:30. And some of the locations that we have had these meetings at include libraries both in Eudora and Baldwin City, and several locations throughout Lawrence and Lecompton. Some outcomes from this practice are to build relationships with food systems community leaders and bring new voices and insight from community members across Douglas County to the council. The Food Policy Council has obtained a Blue Cross Blue Shield Pathways grant to allow for our council to support more community participation.
So the Douglas County Food System Plan was adopted in 2017. The plan, intensive community engagement that supported the development of this plan has made these objectives and goals on this plan still very much relevant to several cross-sector collaborations. This slide shows some of the plans that the Douglas County Food Policy Council has contributed to in 2023 and 2024. The Food Council has used the Food System Plan to inform city, county, and regional planning efforts. The council has participated in informing other plans via letters to committees, staff, co-hosting workshops to inform these plans. Council membership has also served on steering committees like the Adapt Douglas County, and I believe Cody was in the open space plan as well. And most recently, the council is on the County Health Improvement Plan Committee as well. On the top left, you see an image. The council will be convening next month food system leaders who work directly with large quantities of food delivery, transportation freight, to inform the Connect Freight KC 2050 plan.
I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to some of our working groups. We have, as previously stated, the Douglas County Health Improvement Plan. We have a partner liaison working group working on the
Cody, can you get on the mic for?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, sometimes I worry I'm too loud. So our partner liaison working group working with the Douglas County Health Department focused on developing the food security section for 2024 CHIP. This plan is still in development. We also have a new working group for water for prioritizing natural resource conservation. If you need to check our food system plan for some of our stakes in that, you can check Goal 2, Objective 2, and 3. This working group, again, is the most recently formed, and figuring out what their scope is new to us. Then there's Forward, or the Food Recovery, Waste Reduction, and Diversion Working Group. We are very interested in composting right now. There's a lot of new developments in bucket swap programs in the county. And in addition to that, we are hoping to also do some panel work about food waste recovery sometime soon. Now we have a couple more. We also have the Douglas County Indigenous Food System Plan. And so that is going to be developed in partnership with the Haskell Indian Nations University and the USDA Extension Office, and the IFSS Working Group serves as the steering committee for the study and the plan. In addition to that, we have the Economic Development Working Group, which is somewhat straightforward, building an equitable entrepreneurial ecosystem. So here are some of our membership and which working groups they are primarily part of. I would like to point out that while this is a guide to show you what membership and who's leading in some of these working groups, that doesn't mean that each of these members doesn't also participate in the other working groups. And it's also worth pointing out that members of the public are also participating in these working groups and are able to influence what we are working and focusing on. The Food and Farm Working Group focuses on building the local food economy and ensuring we maintain necessary and natural resources for continued local agricultural production. In February, Food and Farm was, along with the Economic Development Working Group, organized a food business startup panel discussion and resource fair in collaboration with K-State Extension and Haskell Indian Nations University Extension Office. This event was focused on policy and safety. This working group, Food and Farm, is currently working on supporting the site search and development for the Lawrence Farmers Market permanent location.
So the Indigenous Food System Study and Action Plan is important because this plan strives to be culturally inclusive, which correlates with the Food Systems Plan's goals to foster an equitable food system, especially in celebrating diversity within the county. And the native population in Lawrence is over 3,200 residents that represent over 145 tribal nations. Recognizing this diversity and our presence in the local food system is a step towards inclusion of Indigenous voices in policy in Douglas County. Douglas County has the resources through community members, Haskell Indian Nation University, neighboring tribes to better support and recognize Indigenous peoples in the local food system. We are currently in the development stages of the plan, and we are in communication with prospective candidates, data experts, and cultural consultants to assist with the formulation of the plan. This is a locally led project, however, we do have national support.
The Economic Development Working Group has recently completed a year-long study of mobile food vending permitting policies in Douglas County, which includes a partnership with the University of Kansas Health and Exercise Science Department in developing a stakeholder and community engagement plan that was implemented through the county in the fall of 2023. So this study can also be found on our website under the document section. The result of this work was a final report and policy recommendations for the City of Lawrence to amend their existing ordinance, providing a more welcoming environment for food truck entrepreneurs to operate. In June this year, the Lawrence City Commissioners adopted an amended ordinance which created an updated annual permit period, extended the hours of operation per day from 3 to 12, and eliminated site plan requirements for mobile food vendors or food trucks. This working group is currently working on a pilot program through the Online Restaurant Academy. This is in partnership with Network Kansas, the KU Small Business Development Center, and Douglas County Government. A group of 10 food service entrepreneurs will take a 6-week course aimed at helping them set up and run a successful food business. The pilot is scheduled to begin in early September. Both of these initiatives have used the E3 Nations theory of change, centering entrepreneur voices to inform their work. So what is next? The Food System Plan, a 10-year plan adopted in 2017, will soon reach its 10-year mark. The DCFPC still finds relevance in the objectives and goals included in the Food System Plan, and has identified some gaps that need further studying and planning. Some of these gap sectors include the unique Indigenous Native American population in our county, farmers' mental health and suicide prevention, region-specific rural food entrepreneur opportunities, region-specific rural food access. The council will be working on gathering community input and data on these gap sectors and others in the next couple of years to inform the future of our county's food system plan. Work such as the Indigenous Food System Study and Action Plan, which will commence in the next couple of months. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I know I will have a lot of questions, but commissioners, would you care to start?
Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I was looking at you first, Commissioner Kelly, to defer to you, since sometimes it's hard to look at the screen from where I sit. Thank you for that overview. I really appreciated it, and getting a little bit more context for some of the slides and some of the things that I've read about. There's a lot of exciting work that I think you all do. Some top of mind questions are, I'll sort of rewind backwards. So about the food truck ordinance change and some of the work that you talked about, Connie, related to the E3 and entrepreneurial work that's going on in Douglas County. Has any part of the conversation been collecting some data about possible increase in opportunities and income revenue for those businesses now that they have more opportunities. Like, do you know if that's something that the sort of cohort, maybe that's not the correct word, but I'm loosely describing what you talked about as like a cohort of folks that are going to try and evaluate like what the growth and opportunity for them was and measure that some way. I'm just curious if that's a piece of the conversation that you're aware of, and if not, then I just offer that as it would be interesting to hear some of that or see that. You know, it's not necessarily directly related to the county work since it's a city ordinance, but to but because the county has been so focused on entrepreneurial support and recognizing that food work in all its sort of forms is core to a lot of those conversations. I'd be curious to see if those updated ordinances really alleviate pressures that were previously being experienced by those entrepreneurs. So it wasn't exactly a question, but if you have a response, go for it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I will definitely bring this back to that working group. One thing that I do want to mention is that a lot of the work that the Economic Development Working Group is focusing on is stepping stones for underrepresented food entrepreneurs. So before you go into a brick and mortar, the best route is to try it at home or, Culinary Commons, or the next one would be a food truck. But if you only have 3 hours, you can't really do too much. So that's why they focus on changing that City of Lawrence ordinance. But the report was a Douglas County-wide report. The rest of the county cities didn't have barriers, and that's why there weren't any recommendations for those other locations. But we'll bring that back.
Can I tag on to that before you take the next topic? So I also followed that work with food trucks and was really glad for the work. So that was fun and neat that it got flagged and resolved. And I really enjoyed watching Food Policy Council step into that space. For us on the county side, we are going to be reworking our rural home business regulations, and I would love for any thoughts that kind of come forward, exactly what you're talking about, like how businesses scale, where they start, what barriers do we have that are not necessary, and how do we be more supportive. So I would love for that work to also kind of dovetail, if possible, with Food Policy Council, and if there's just any other pieces of county policy that you come across in the course of your work that we need to know about as potential barriers and such. So I also flag that about the economic development part of what you're doing there, because food and farm businesses are businesses and we don't always treat them as such. I was curious what other economic development partners in the community that you feel close alignment with or work well with, or find strong ties with, as we have quite a lot of economic development partners, some of which have county funding, and we're just curious to know where you've found kind of alignment and help.
Yeah, I mean, we have kind of an upper hand because we have both of the extension offices in our council currently represented. The Haskell Indian Nation Section Office, Mackie Moore is a board member, and Margit represents the K-State extension offices. Also, the Douglas County Food Policy Council Economic Development Working Group participates in the e-community meetings and is engaged in that network. We work really closely with the Small Business Development Center. I think that Network Kansas, I would say that those are our top two, along with the Haskell Indian Nation School of Business.
And you mentioned the Small Business Development Center, and the KU Small Business Development Center has been up and running for a long time and a strong partner, but there's also one becoming established at Haskell. Are those ties that are also forming as they're standing up that work?
Yes, my interpretation of that relationship is that their Haskell liaison through the KU Small Business Center, Christian Hopkins, I think. Yeah, we work with them pretty closely. So it's a pretty small team.
Want the next question since I tagged onto yours.
Thank you. Good questions. I am very excited about more news in the development of the Indigenous food system study. I'm curious, and Star, nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. And you mentioned, in addition to Haskell and their USDA Extension Office that has recently become really active, that also talking with neighboring tribes. And so that was a question I had flagged when reading this, in curiosity about whether we've gotten to that stage yet, and maybe not, because I know it's very early, about talking with the tribal nations that are within the state boundaries of Kansas in particular, maybe beyond too. But and part of what brings that to top of mind is thinking about my familiarity with the Iowa tribe of Kansas, Nebraska, and a lot of food system work and agricultural work that they have been focused on in their tribal lands, and selling some of those products here locally. And so I was just curious if anybody could speak to whether or not we've started exploring any direct conversations with those sovereign tribal nations about exploring possibilities about their participation in this study in particular, or this work group in particular. Maybe there's some representation there that I'm not aware of also.
Yeah, so again, my name is Star Hermeni Horses, and as the food systems intern, a big part of my work is developing just a list and developing those contacts again with tribes, with other Indigenous entrepreneurs, and how they can help impact this food systems action plan. And so far, it's just a part of the conversation about communicating with tribes, but it is like a top priority of ours to reach out to them and see how they work with the tribal members in supporting them, and how we can implement what their programs, or what systems are in place on their nations, on how we can support Indigenous entrepreneurs here in Lawrence and community members. And like you said too, there are many tribal nations that have their own products and just different things like that that are available online. And I do think that, just from my perspective, that with the history of Haskell Indian Nations University here in Lawrence, and noting that there's a large Indigenous population here, that they would want to have relationships with us and helping in developing this plan. So establishing those connections is the next step, and I'm really optimistic about it.
I would flag Commissioner Reed that the Iowa tribe has been like a regional leader of across. I mean, it's making a reputation across the state of Kansas, and would love to see like what they've learned is available for our region also, especially around soil health. That's been kind of their calling card as far as healing the land through soil health. So I'm excited. Thank you for bringing that one up.
Yeah, thanks for that response. I'm excited, and think that there's a lot of possibilities for all of the reasons that you articulated, Star. And so I'm excited to hear how that develops, and think that it's a really interconnected focus. I mean, it touched it, where I appreciate that the focus here is, from the Food Policy Council, is on the food system study, but I think that it interplays with so many other initiatives and plans that we have going on at the county, between climate action plan and open space in particular that we discussed a little bit here tonight. That those things are all very interrelated, and I'm interested in, as the conversations continue, how those dots are getting connected, and how we're thinking about all the ways to leverage the experts in our community and nearby our community in terms of there's a lot of possibility. If you can't tell, I'm excited, but I'll just leave it at that. And I don't have any other immediate questions, so I'll mute myself.
Thank you. First, I want to celebrate that you brought back like changing the locations up around the county, which I always love, kind of that geographic diversity, but it also brings in just different approaches and thoughts based on the different people that you're going to be with. And that was a pre-pandemic thing that I think went away, and I'm really glad to see it coming back. I would also kind of challenge you to include commodity farmers in those site visits and in the work and in the conversation. They are the largest land, make decisions over the largest tracts of land in Douglas County by far, and we need that cross communication in every possible way. So they've traditionally been hard to have in the conversation, or hard to keep in the conversation with Food Policy Council, but that we can't ever stop trying. Like that is that it's just a huge call of where we need to be, and part of that, and this is to tag on Commissioner Reed also, that the piece of Food Policy Council that taps into all these other pieces of county work, the open space plan and the climate action plan. I would even throw in there like biodiversity, which is one of the crises of our time, is soil health. So if that can be, just elevated in your work, I know there's not a working group currently around soil health, but I think there are conversations across the state of Kansas, across the nation, across the world, that would be helpful for us to have a regional focus on that. Like we have no food systems without soil health, and we have no nutrient density without promoting soil health. And it's just, I love to see that conversation, interweaving in all of those pieces and all of those different plans. So I would welcome and challenge to have more conversations around that. And if I can help connect you to folks who would want to be in that, I'd be happy to. Love the food waste work, so important, and so many conversations, and we're so far behind with 30 years ago, I lived in Germany, and everybody collected their compost, and it was part of the municipal. It was just understood that everybody did it. And not only that, you didn't create a lot of food waste because we just valued food more in that culture, and just getting us there is, we have a lot of work to do. And we can save so much water by just not wasting food. So you can tell I get excited about these things too. I know there hasn't been any conversation really about food and chemical use, and that's kind of, it's always the elephant in the room when we talk about food, is how do we produce our food? What products are we using to produce our food? Or organic does many things, it doesn't do all things, but we still have to have, an honest conversation with ourselves about food and food production and what that does to biodiversity and human health, et cetera, and soil health and water and all that. So now I'm just soapboxing. So I will turn to Commissioner Kelly and see, do you have other things that you want to talk about?
No, I just want to thank you all for your work, and especially am grateful when the Food Policy Council considers land use issues that come before the Douglas County Commission. As someone who doesn't, this isn't my wheelhouse, I will be honest. Food policy is something that I turn to experts like you for, and so just very grateful when you weigh in on those issues. Really appreciate the work you're doing and appreciate the update tonight.
Thank you.
I had one more that I found in my notes, if you'll let me have this one. You mentioned about finding a permanent home for the Lawrence Farmers Market, and Ottawa is way beyond us in terms of they have a permanent location for our farmers market. And I would just challenge you to go to some of the folks for the various iterations who've worked on this before and why it hasn't worked, because we've been just to the cusp of it and missed it more than once. I would recommend or suggest, and this is probably fairly unpopular, but we have some larger established producers that have their own venue for selling season long and throughout the year that have, I think, been resistant to this. So it is, in terms of equity, it's getting a location for everyone starting up to be able to market their products. But I think that's just something that we've turned a blind eye to the folks that have not wanted it because they already have that corner on the market. So you have quite a challenge ahead of you, and I would love to see that succeed and be wonderful.
Yeah, like you mentioned, this has been maybe over a decade of work and the council has been supporting this work as well. My interpretation that is that Emily Lyson, the director of the Lawrence Farmers Market, is working with the city to find a location. The Lawrence Farmers Market wants to have the location downtown. Even though it is based in Lawrence, it does bring farmers from all across the county. So it's pretty important. My understanding is that they're working with the city to find a site, and the next big hurdle is funding.
I have one more question I remembered. And this is just broad. I didn't remember that there was a Kansas Food Policy Council, and I thought maybe I just forgot that. And then Connie, you spoke about how that's a relatively new development. So I'm curious is it sort of like the nature of it is to be advisory to all those other food policy and farmer councils? And I realize you're not a member of the council, so you may not feel like you can speak totally directly to it, but is it your impression that that's the goal and intent of that statewide council, to be sort of advisory or directional in nature to the spectrum of councils that you said are quite plentiful in our state, which is an interesting fact to learn? And I'm just curious if it's very directive in nature, or more of a resource for local food policy councils to go seek information or avenues to programming.
Yes, so just to clarify, so Kansas Food Action Network, KFAN, convenes a multitude of food and farm councils across the state of Kansas. I believe there may be about 25 or 30 at the moment and growing. And it's really unique to the state of Kansas. Like I mentioned before, we have the highest number of food and farm councils across the nation. Our food system in Kansas is really unique, and Douglas County is one of the leaders, not just in the state, but nationwide, truly. The newly developed State Food Policy Council just had their meeting, I believe, this month. The representatives are going to be attending the Food and Farm Council's convening in August 29th in Wichita, which some of our board members will be attending as well. So I am not fully sure of what the relationship of the state and county and city councils will be like, but I know that Kansas is really unique in organizing food policy.
Very helpful context. Thanks.
Well, I'm thrilled for the update and excited to hear all the work. And I know we've just laid all this other work, and while you're at it, go do this. So I know there will be prioritization that goes along with that. But Commissioner Kelly, anything else that you would like to add to the conversation? All right. This is also informational only, and I almost forgot to take public comment. So if you will hold back just a sec, and I will turn and say, is there anyone here in the room who would like to give public comment on this item? And do we have anyone online who would too? To the commission, there's no action item here. Do you have any other questions for us, or from the feedback, are you getting what you need to out of our conversation?
This was really helpful. We hope to be back to share more about the Indigenous Food System Study and Action Plan and other data collection and research that the council will be doing.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here and for all of your work. And that is our final agenda item. We do have, I don't know if we have any appointments to make this evening. We have quite a few that have just come onto our calendar. Checking. No, I didn't hear back from the one that I was looking for.
Yeah, I don't have any primed to go unless commissioners know something I don't.
Looks like we have a fair number of conversations to have with some folks that are eligible to be appointed to see if they want to, and then some new positions to find. So I think we've got our work cut out for us. Sarah, will you give us your weekly memo?
Thanks, Commissioners. My weekly memo is attached to your packet. Just some upcoming dates about canvases for the primary election and other behavioral health court graduation. In your packet, you've got updated information from the Housing Stabilization Collaborative. Some of their first quarter and second quarter data is attached. The July appraisal newsletter. Some updated information, just the July newsletter from Consolidated Fire District 1 and Little Government Relations. Also have the Q2 mid-year report from the EDC, and that's it on those items. Commissioners, we do not have a work session next week. We will have a meeting, and then on August 7th, we will have a work session at 4 o'clock to review the capital improvement plan and the Consolidated Fire District number 1 budget. And Commissioners, that's all I've got.
All right, Commissioners, do you have anything else for this evening?
I just want to flag the oh my gosh, I just saw the words and then they left me. The election canvas, and clarify that I expect to not participate in that as a candidate. And so want to just flag that I'll need somebody to stand in for me if you can facilitate that, Sarah.
I will speak to the treasurer and the Register of Deeds and see if they're available.
Okay, thank you.
Good idea. Anything else, Commissioners? All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.